All right. Good evening, everybody, and good night to some of those that are further away. But thank you all so much for joining us tonight. My name is Dr. Fran Abenyi. I am the current incoming president for the Ghana Physicians and Surgeons Foundation. I'm a pediatric infectious disease physician by training, a medical epidemiologist, and I work at the CDC. You all are in for a treat tonight. So tonight we are hosting a webinar entitled The Journey to Success, Residency Matching as an International Medical Grad. So we're going to have a panel discussion tonight, and I'm going to introduce our panelists. But before I do, there's a quote that says, "Success is inevitable when preparation meets opportunity." And I think that is the theme of the stories that you are going to hear tonight. And I hope that what is shared tonight will encourage many on this line, not just in your journey to medicine, but just in your journey in life. So before I introduce everybody, we will take questions throughout. So as everybody is speaking, if questions come to your mind, feel free to put it in the chat and we will address them before the end of the session, okay? So first, I'm going to introduce our moderator, Dr. Sybil Pencil. She's a graduate of Wesley Girls. She completed her Bachelor's of Science degree in chemistry, similar to me, with summa cum laude distinction at University at Albany. She went on to get her medical degree and MPH at Johns Hopkins University, and then Sinai Hospital for Peds internship and residency, where she stayed on as a hospitalist and pediatric program director. She currently serves as the Chief Diversity Officer at LifeBridge Health, the parent organization of Sinai Hospital, and holds a faculty clinical professor appointment at George Washington University in DC and Accra College of Medicine in Accra, where she teaches the patient safety course. Wow. An amazing moderator. Thank you for joining us. And then our panelists. So our first panelist is Dr. Akwesi Amponsa. After graduating from Rutgers University, which is where we met, he completed his medical degree at Robert Wood Johnson Medical School, where he went on to complete his anesthesiology residency. From there, he went to St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital in Manhattan, New York, to complete his pain management fellowship. After a brief period in private practice, he joined the University of Miami's anesthesia pain management group, where he later became the program director for the pain management fellowship program. Most recently, in 2019, he relocated back to New Jersey to serve as the pain management fellowship program director for Rutgers, New Jersey Medical School. Welcome, Dr. Mponsa. One fun fact about him is he's an avid soccer player and a father of two girls. And then our two panelists, I'm not going to say a whole lot because the point of tonight is for them to really share their journeys, but I will give you a little bit tidbits about them. So Dr. Nafal Kenneth Da Silva graduated from the University of Cape Coast School of Medical Science, in 2020. And he started his intern year as a categorical general surgery resident at Advent Health in Tampa, Florida. He has a passion for clinical research and would like to go on to become a pediatric surgeon. And then we have Dr. Kojo Apiedu Danso. He attended KNUST, School of Medicine and Sciences, and graduated in 2017. He matched into pediatrics at the University of Illinois College of Medicine at Peoria. I met both of them, interestingly enough, at Cape Coast Teaching Hospital in 2022 during an International Healthcare Volunteer Medical Mission. And I was absolutely impressed with both of them, just their clinical acumen and their leadership. So I'm very, very excited to have them tonight and very excited and so pleased that you both matched this year. It is just such a blessing to know you. And I'm so appreciative that you all were both willing to share your journey with others. One thing about Dr. Dansel that I'll share is he mentioned this a little bit ago before we started recording, but he is somebody that's passionate about pouring into others. So he's taken it upon himself to have sessions with others that are on the same journey as him to pour into them and to share what his journey has been. He's designated several sessions to different topic areas to help IMGs on their journey. So thank you for doing that. We really, really do appreciate that. And I'm going to now pass it over to our moderator. Take it away, Sybil.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vaney, and thank you for the invitation. I don't take it for granted. This is something that I'm very passionate about, and so I'm really, really honored to be in this position. Now, we're sitting at 88 people. I want to see over 100 people in this gathering. There's so much information to share, and this is information that all of our incoming folks need. I heard Dr. Danso say in the opening statements that there were 40 international grads from Ghana who matched this year. I believe in the coming match we can make it 80. I genuinely believe that. I
Yeah.
met with someone just yesterday who didn't match. And as soon as they told me everything in their application, I knew exactly why they didn't match. There are truths here that we need. So get your friends on this call so we can share all this vital information. Dr. Da Silva, we are going to start with you. We'd like you to share your journey with us. I understand you have some slides that you'd like to share. If you can go ahead and see if you can pull them up. We just want to get right to it. Now, as he's doing that, if you have questions, please throw them in the chat. And as we go along, we're going to hear from Dr. Da Silva. We'll hear also from Dr. Danso and Dr. Amponsa. And then we're going to get into a bit of Q&A and touch on some really, really, really important things that you really need to know as you prepare for the application cycle. So let's start with you, Dr. Da Silva. Tell us your story. Tell us your journey.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Pencil. And I don't take it for granted for being here, for sharing my experience with everyone. It's truly a privilege to be here. So I'm going to get right ahead. Um, I hope everyone can see my slides. Just confirming.
Yes.
Perfect. So my name is Naufal da Silva. I am actually a Benin citizen, but I came to Ghana, and Ghana is pretty much my second home now. I went to medical school there, started in 2014 and graduated in 2020 from the University of Cape Coast. I worked for 2 years, as many in Ghana know. You need to do that in order to get your permanent license to work. And as I will talk about later, it does help actually in in your residency journey. So I worked for 2 years there. My first year was in Ho Teaching Hospital, and my second year was in Cape Coast Teaching Hospital, which is where I met Dr. Abanye. I worked for 5 months following that as a medical officer. And then while I was doing my house job and working as a medical officer, I was preparing for my STEP exams as well, because that was my goal. And I applied for residency just last year and thankfully matched into categorical general surgery. Now, just a brief overview for the exams. It's step one, as many know already. This is just a brief overview. Step one, step two, CK, OET. In order to get your ECFME certificate, you need to apply through one of the pathways. And you have the ECFME certificate. And if you want, which is highly advised actually, to pass your step three before applying, especially if you're applying to competitive specialties. Now, some tips. If you have any questions, please note them down and we'll address all of them. Some tips about studying for these exams, some things that were useful to me. I'll share them here. It's never too early to start, really never too early. I wish I started even earlier when I was in medical school. And you need to work towards a goal, because when I started, I knew what year exactly I was applying, and I was working towards that. So that helps in planning, especially when you need to take your exams, when you need to apply for your ECFM certificate for rotations in the US, when you need to start asking for letter of recommendations, all of that. If you don't have a set date, a set goal, it makes that a bit more difficult. The resources for these exams, I kind of put everything together, step one, step two, even step three. The less, the better. And there is a quote here from the first aid book, as many of you know already. In section 4, this is the 2023 version that I screenshotted this from. You go to the top rated review resources, you have a bunch of them there. They usually grade them by A minus, A plus, and so on and so forth. And I mean, if it's A plus, A minus, it's higher quality than those that are C and D and so forth. And there is a quote here saying that some books are to be tasted, others to be swallowed, and some few to be chewed and digested, which is very accurate, especially for these exams. But the second quote here that I like is, so many books, so little time. And this is true, especially because there are so many resources for these exams that it's easy to get overwhelmed as to which book is the best, and which one should I stick to, and so on. And the less you use, the better. Actually, there are some that universally everyone use, and I would recommend you to use. UWorld, that is pretty much everyone uses that, and I'll recommend you to use that. First Aid is the book I took the screenshot from. There is a first aid for step 1, there's a first aid for step 2, and step 3, I believe, as well. And there's some podcasts you can use. I use Divine Intervention podcast. He's actually a Nigerian guy who I think he should be an attending now, but his podcasts are extremely, extremely informative. And some YouTube channels, there are like thousands of them that you can learn from. For biostatistics, for instance, there is a channel by Dr. Randy Nail, which almost everyone I know uses. I put Anki there. It worked for some people, doesn't work for everyone, because it's something you need to be doing every day. Because if you miss a day, then it piles up and you get overwhelmed. Study groups, I put a question mark there because it didn't really work for me. I work better in small groups, like 2 or 3 people maximum. When I was preparing for step 1, I had a study partner who was from Nigeria, a fantastic lady. We studied together pretty much all day. We set up like a Zoom meeting like this, and both of us will just be studying on our end. And if we had any questions, we'll just ask, and the other will answer. So if study groups work for you, you should do that because it does help, especially in like motivating yourself, but it's not for everyone. And then you need to also plan your assessments. There are a bunch of them. The UWorld self-assessment in the UWorld. So when you purchase UWorld, you usually have 2 self-assessments in there, especially when you purchase the 6 months one. You have the NBME ones, and the NBME CMS assessments are written by, those questions are written by those who actually write the actual exam. And so you'll find them really helpful. You notice that the language in these assessments are slightly different from the language in the UWorld questions. And so it really helps to kind of have a feel of both before the exam. And same for the free 120. They are free 120 questions that you find online, also written by the same people who set the questions for the USMLE exams. And my last point here is to book your exam early, because as you can see from my slides here, I put some pins into those 4 countries, and these are the only 4 testing centers in Africa. There's one in Ghana, luckily, one in Kenya, Uganda, and one in South Africa. And that's it. So if you don't book ahead, you notice a lot of people come from Nigeria, from Cameroon, and all these countries, and they're all writing at the same center, which is in Ghana. So you want to book your exam dates ahead. US experience, it's really important. In my case, I think it's what made the biggest difference in my story, in my journey. Extremely important. That doesn't mean you can't match into residency if you don't have any UX experience, but your chances are pretty slim, and you want to maximize your chances, of course. So having some US experience really, really helps. I'll get into the finances of that later because it is not cheap to come to the US, to stay in the US for a long time, and so on. And there are different things you can do here: an observership, externship, internship, sub-internship, research fellowship, and so on. They are all US experiences. They're all useful. Some are more useful than others. For graduates, which I'm sure a lot of us are, it's not difficult, it's impossible to get an internship as a graduate because internships are for students. So that's pretty much, out of question if you're a graduate. I had an internship when I was a student, and if you have the opportunity and if you're still a student, I would advise you, is that your goal later on to match into residency, to take advantage of your internship years and to try and do them in the US if that's your goal. Externship is what you can do once you're a graduate, right? And you're a bit more limited in what you can do depending on the place you go to. But it's pretty much similar to an internship, but the only difference is that you're a graduate. An observership is kind of self-explanatory. You're just there to observe. A sub-internship is something US medical students do, um, because they have their core rotation that they do, like we also do in Ghana. But after you're done with these core rotations, US medical students in their 4th years usually do a sub-internship in their specialty of choice. So if they want to go, for example, into plastic surgery, after they're done with all their core clerkships, they can now do an additional rotation called a sub-internship. And the duration of that varies. It could be for a month, it could be for longer than that, but it's into their specialty of interest. The last one is a research fellowship, which is where you pretty much work in research, which is currently what I'm doing, by the way, which I'll be ending soon. And these are your gateway to strong letter of recommendations, because you want people to know you, and it's only when people know you enough they can write you a really good letter of recommendations. The personal statement is something that's important in your application. It's something that talks about who you are, about your motivations into your specialty of interest, talks about your future goals and things like that. But it's also a tricky part of your application because you don't want to make it too long and too boring because these program directors, and I'm sure Dr. Amponsa will touch on that a bit later, they receive thousands of applications. And you don't want to have a 3 or 4 pages personal statement because no one will read that. You want to keep it short, but keep it straight to the point, easy to read, make it into a story. I made mine into a sort of story. I talked about some struggles I had during medical school, but it's not just about, narrating what you went through. It's also about telling the reader what you learned from it and how it made you better. So you can talk about patient interaction that fulfill your interest, hobbies that tied into your interest. I read a personal statement from someone who talked about his love of painting and tied that into medicine. So the key is to show, but not to tell. You don't say I'm a hardworking person, but you show it through your story. You talk about an experience you had while working and how your qualities really made you stand out. The interview, of course, once you're at the interview stage, you're already, pretty much almost in. You need to be familiar with everything that's on your CV, absolutely everything. I was asked about every single thing on my CV in my various interviews. So you need to be familiar with it. If you put a research in your CV, you need to really be well versed with that research because you will be asked about that. And you need to sound natural and not rehearse. You don't want to sound robotic. Tell me about yourself, and then it sounds like a record that you start playing, and my name is this and that. You need to sound natural, right, when you're talking about yourself. Now, funding, as I said, it's really expensive to be in the US, especially for a long time. Savings, especially if you plan well ahead, your savings can help a whole lot. Having help from family, I, had tremendous help from my family, and I will never take that for granted. If that is a difficulty, then you can take loans because ultimately you need to know that it's an investment you're doing into your future and it will pay off. So taking loans may not be the worst idea. US medical students, for instance, take lots and lots of loans to pay their medical school tuition and things like that. So you could do that. Personal connections help a lot, and I put that in because it's not just about your tickets to come to the US and your accommodation and food and things like that. There are a lot of other things. If you know someone who can help in accommodation, for instance, take advantage of that. So you need to be strategic. Where do I do my rotation? Do I know someone in the area that I can stay with? They'll be comfortable with me staying with the person. How many programs you apply to, because you can literally apply to all programs in all specialties. There's nothing preventing you from doing that, but it has to be something you can afford. So you need to be strategic about the number of programs you apply to, and also attending interviews. In my season, in my application season, most of my interviews were virtual. Prior to COVID, I mean, because of COVID, most of the interviews became virtual, but COVID is it's kind of in the past now. The world is recovering and things are slowly getting back to normal. So I am anticipating that a lot more interviews might be in person moving forward. So that also might be something you need to think about. Mentorship. I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about this during this session, but it is so, so important to have someone that understands your journey, understands where you're going, understands, your struggles and can give you good professional advice and even like personal advice. So network during your rotations. Dr. Banye mentioned that we met, when we were in Ghana. She came for this volunteering thing in Cape Coast Teaching Hospital, and that's how we met. And she's been really a great mentor to me, over the years. And this is the last thing I'll talk about is cultural adjustments. When you come to the US, I put this map here kind of to show you're in the US and you'll meet people from literally all over the world. And people, have different religions, different political ideologies, different personal views. And there's so much happening in the US. And you need to be open-minded to know that, my views may not be everyone else's views. And I need to understand that. Be friendly to everyone, be curious. You'll see things in the hospital even that you don't understand, and you just ask because a lot of people are also friendly and will understand that you're not from here and will be willing to explain things to you. So that helps a lot, especially being open-minded, helps a lot with the cultural adjustments. And finally, you are running a marathon, not a sprint race. So especially when it's come when you're preparing for your exams, you're studying like 10, 12 hours a day. If you do that, you're gonna burn out. So you need to keep in mind that it's a long run. The important thing is just to be consistent. I mean, I can confidently say that every single day I was studying. It could be one question that I was doing a day, or it could be 40 questions or 80 questions. But the point is that I was consistent, and that helps because you don't want to, get burnt out and then stop and then resume, 2 weeks later because you'll forget the things you've learned. So please be mindful of that and pray, pray. I'm not clearly not the most religious person you'll find around, but I do understand the value of God and the value of prayer. And it's something I'll advise. I mean, if it's something you're into. So that's it. If you have any questions, please, I'm here to help. My email is there as well. And thank you.
Wow, Dr. De Silva, what a wonderful introduction. You really touched on pretty much everything. For those of us attending, we are at 100 people. We want more. There's more information to get out there. Listen, we're looking for the 80 people who are going to match in the
Correct.
coming season. All right. So get your friends out. Let's have everyone join. Wonderful, wonderful introduction. And thank you for those in the chat who are answering questions. I'm able to sit back and relax. I don't have to do half the work here because you guys are doing it all. So thank you so much for your engagement. Please remember to throw some questions in the chat for some of the things that Dr. De Silva has talked about. We will delve into a little bit more information. Oh, I understand we've hit the maximum. So sorry, the 80 people who are matching are right here. Hey, y'all are here right now. So if you are not writing, if you are not documenting the information, please leave so somebody else can join because this is vital information. You need this. And soon we're going to go to Dr. Amponsa because I really want to hear from the program director's perspective because there's some key things. I've been a program director before. There's some key things we look for. So it's really vital that you hear what he has to say. But before then, let's go to the person who pursued me on Twitter. None other, none other than Dr. Danso himself. I was so excited to get that message from him this year. And honestly, this truly was a record year for Ghana, for Africa. It really was a record year. There were people who were texting me saying thank you, and I'm like, I don't even remember this person. I talked to them at some point in the journey. So we are in a crucial time. You want to hear this information. Dr. Dancer, tell us a little bit about your journey. We're at 6:23, so let's tighten it up so we can get into some of the questions and some of the specific things. Let's hear your story.
Thank you very much, Dr. Peso, for such a wonderful introduction. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. And I'm just going to share, I would like to share my slide. It's just one slide. It's just the outline that I want to work with. Nothing fancy. So I'll do mine in form of a narrative where, as I kind of go through my story, I touch on all these, all these things I've listed here. So my name is Dano. So I completed KNUST Med School 2017. I did housemanship. For me, I'm a hardcore pediatric person. So right from the get-go, I was like pediatrics and nothing else. So I went through housemanship and then went on to do my to become a medical officer in pediatrics, and then eventually worked my way, to this point. So starting from studying for and taking the STEP exams, Dr. Da Silva did a wonderful presentation by going into the details of, the STEP exam, and I will come from the angle of, the practicalities, because for the most part, some of us have to work and pay. You have to work, save, and pay. And now with the dollar being like 12 cedis to $1, is huge. So there's one thing I realized, that once you get your USMLE account, actually on the ECFMT website, there's an option where you can make monthly payments, monthly installments. So when I was doing when I was taking my step 1, I didn't realize it back then, but when I was taking step 2, I realized that I didn't have to save all the money and pay at once, because by the time I saved the money, the dollar rate had shot up. So I ended up paying more. So what I ended up doing was, every time save like $100 each month. So when you go to the ECFMG website, there's an option where you can make payments. And this is very important because sometimes the journey becomes too far out when we are thinking about the finances. But if there's a way that's okay, every month when you are paid a salary, you can make a payment of maybe $100 each month for a period of time. You can save up to like the $1,200 to register for the exam and take it. That makes it very achievable because then you don't sit down and say that you are waiting to get the money before you take the exam serious. Because you can pay whilst you are working and studying, you are in the game. So that's pretty much what I'll say about, studying and taking the exams. Everybody's timeline is different. Trust me. At this point, we are also doing life. We have a whole bunch of things we are working, towards achieving. So it's not just, the fact that maybe you are not a family person. So all you do is right from work, you go to sit down and you study. You may have a family, you may have a kid. So your timelines may be different. But just as how Dr. Da Silva took us through, you take, the most important resources, UWorld, first aid, pathoma, you come out with a strategy that works for you and you give yourself time because you want to pass the exam very well. Going through the March cycle, I marched on my third attempt, and until the third attempt, I didn't understand certain things. So now I can say that things that do not work out in the first time are things that eventually help you make it right the last time that you end up matching. And so for letters of recommendation, I realized that we may think that you can just ask anybody, but the stronger letters come from people who are involved in teaching students, residents, fellows, not just any specialists. Like for most of us who are marching from Ghana, not just any maybe a specialist, or should I say someone who just finished residency 2 months ago, you are going to ask for a letter of recommendation. Because at the end of the day, the background of the person writing it matters. When program directors are reading that, they are trying to find, okay, this person who is recommending you, how familiar are they with, grading residents or students? So if they say you are a good resident, do they have what it takes to make that statement? Because if they've been teaching residents, then they can have that capacity to do so. So when you're asking for letters of recommendation, ask from those who are actively involved in teaching students, residents, and fellows. Now, when it comes to US clinical experience, during my journey, I came to a point where I realized that, okay, if I have to do US clinical experience, it comes at a cost. And at the time, you would pay something like $2,000 for a month rotation. That's maybe that's maybe money that you have. If you have, obviously go for it. But maybe if you don't have that amount of money, what I can say is, when you get to the point where you are reviewing programs to apply to, then you need to be a bit realistic that, okay, every program has their requirements. Some programs say we need 1 year US clinical experience. Some say we need 6 months. Some say 3 months. Some say we prefer it, but it's not required. What you can do is to get in touch with the program, if possible, to clarify that piece of information. And that can actually be a way that you can get in touch with the program where you kind of like appear on their radar and you follow up, you don't pester them though, but you follow up with open communication to kind of like keep them reminded that you are interested in their program. Because see, all this that we are doing, we are trying to kind of like make ourselves available to them that this is who we are. This is our interest. And so we are letting you know that we are interested in your program and we are looking forward to applying. And that is how you can maybe distinguish yourself from someone who just, sends the application to a program. Okay. So we move on to the essay or the personal statement. Now, this is a very important piece because this is where, this one of the places that I go in touch with Dr. Pencil, because I realized that, we should first and foremost realize our audience. I apply to pediatrics. I've worked with pediatricians. I have an idea how pediatricians, the kind of personality they are, it should reflect in the letter. or else it will be out of touch. When a pediatrician reads your personal statement, they should be able to sense someone who is fond with children in there, or else it will be out of touch. And so this is where you can get in touch with people who are already in the field to try and establish contacts, number one. Be gracious, number two, because they may not have the time to respond. But if someone responds to your reach out, don't end up, kind of like pestering the person. That's why I always say that you need to be organic in your approach. You need to let things flow naturally, because that helps to even build some form of a natural relationship between you and maybe the mentor or the person you are reaching out to. And so that was how I got in touch with Dr. Pencil. She was gracious. She offered her time to read through my statements and tweak some things here and there. And for the most part, in Ghana, we don't write personal statements anywhere. So we don't have the skill and the art of writing it. There is a flair to it. And that's why I would encourage each and everyone to get in touch with, maybe a resident who is a US medical graduate. But the way they are, the way they learn, the way they write, someone can read your personal statement and give you some suggestions as to phrases and how to say certain things, so that when programs read it, they can relate to what you are writing. Because for the most part, in Ghana, as they will say, the British system, we like to stretch things too much, explain things that should not be explained with long sentences. In America, they want to keep it short, straight to the point. So when you get in touch with people who are trained in the US, they can really help you, tweak your personal statement. And of course, the personal statement is just one part of the application. A good personal statement will not save you from a bad application. So think about that. The application has to be good overall. Okay. Now, when it comes to the interview, this is where I would say that going through the cycle a couple of times, I learned some lessons the hard way, which is you go to the interview and you answer questions out of place. And this is what I mean. When you are asked a question on the interview, you have to find a way to kind of like elevate yourself and why you are applying to the program, why you are interested in the program. Not just talk about, oh, you like pediatrics and the reasons or what you are looking for, or if they ask you what your goals are and what you're talking about, do not align with the goals of the program. This is where the term fit comes in. You may be a good candidate, but you may not be a good fit for a program. So this is where you need to take time to, obviously we'll go through interview prep along the, the journey. But then this is where you need to tailor your answers to the program you are interviewing at. You need to tailor your answers to the specialty you are interviewing for. If you are interviewing for pediatrics, they expect you to, be a certain personality. At least come off, you need to show that pediatricians are different. I'm just using that example because I love pediatrics and I match it to pediatrics. If let's say you're having a discussion with Dr. Amponsa, an anesthesiologist, you need to come up different. And these are some of the things that, the interview you learn before you go into the interview, or else you go into the interview thinking that you had a good time and then you will not match because your answers were out of place. Now, when it comes to mentorship, a mentor is someone who can see what, you are capable of and help you discover it. And it's kind of interesting how mentorship works, in the sense that you can have someone who may be a good mentor in a different aspect of life, but not in your USMLE exam, your USMLE journey. That doesn't make the person a bad mentor. It just means that you need to sit down and ask yourself what the strengths of your mentors are. There are some people that you get in touch with and their strength will be to connect you with other people. There are some people, their strength would be to review your application. There are people, their strength would be to help you with interview. So don't just use all your mentors for the same thing. You need to at least find out what the strength of your mentor is so that you can maximize that person's help. And for that matter, find more mentors so that you can have multiple, should I say, help from different angles. And sometimes too, you may get a mentor through a research opportunity. And that may even lead to getting a letter of recommendation where the person is actually talking about the time they spent with you, what you did on the project, your work ethic, what they call the soft skills that can be transferred to clinical practice, because that may only be the opportunity to get in touch with a US physician through research. And once you shine and you put in your best, you'll be able to elevate yourself in the eyes of this mentor. And it can go a long way to the person even advocating for you, because you'll be able to show yourself as as a diligent person. Now, finding funding for time spent in the US is a very, I would say that for most of us, we may take step one, step two before coming to the US. But recently, I realized that some people come to the US to pursue a master's in public health. That is not to say that because you see that someone is doing a master's in public health, you should also do a master's in public health. Some people also come to the US due to family, they immigrate. And so you need to sit down and ask yourself that, okay, if you are going to march from Ghana, it's better to stay in Ghana and write your exam. Don't make any hasty decisions, because once you're in Ghana, you still have the stability, you have a job, you have a salary, as against just moving to the United States because someone is doing MPH. Maybe that person has the extra benefit of their family living here already, but you may even be a family person, and then you leave Ghana, you come, and you have your family back home, and you're even doing an MPH. That is just 1 year, a 1-year program, and you've not even taken any of the steps, and it's like you are under pressure. So on the topic of funding, you need to ask yourself, do you need to stay in Ghana to get this thing done? Of course you can. If you can, it's better to stay in Ghana and at least write step one, step two, even possible step three, and apply. If you apply and then you match, praise be to God. But if you do not match, you are still in Ghana, you have that stability of your job, and then, of having, like the salary to keep you going. Now, when it comes to cultural adjustments, I would say that I'll still re-echo, get in touch with, people who grew up in the US. Because I remember that on my journey, at some point, I started getting in touch with US medical graduates who were residents to at least help review my personal statement, because I realized that when you are always IMGs, the culture that we grew up with is the same. We speak the same, we pretty much think the same. But at least when you get a different flavor, and maybe a US medical graduate or something, when they review your letter, they can bring in certain things. That's a form of cultural adjustment, so that when they read your personal statement or essay, they can at least relate to some of the phrases in there and at least create some level of relatability. And last but not least, not giving up. So not giving up is a very fluid, should I say, experience, in the sense that I remember when we're in Ghana, med school, you would see residence fellows who would go on to write maybe West Africa College of exams. They go the first time, they may not pass. They'll come back, come and work, go again. Some may not, may fail twice and eventually pass the third time. So I used to ask myself that, does that mean that they failed? I mean, at that time, that's how I used to see it. That, oh, when you go to the exam, you should pass. But then it got to a point, I realized that that's pretty much how adulthood is. The fact that you've done certain things doesn't guarantee you success. But at least if you fail and you are redoing it, you are not starting off afresh. Now you know certain things, you know how to tweak things here and there. And so when it comes to not giving up, if you apply to a match and you don't match the first time, don't worry, because believe you me, when you eventually match, you will not even remember all the time that you were sad when you did not match. Because now you realize, oh, some of the things that you took for granted, okay, some of the things that you need to pay attention to, and some of the things you need to change. And so you need to just, ask yourself that, okay, I'm going to keep going at this. I'm not going to see the outcomes of the match as success, failure, but, lessons learned if I do not succeed, and then take it from there. And believe you me, this year I heard people who completed med school 2006, but they matched the first time they applied. And then you sit down, you ask yourself, so those people, like, are they different? No, probably they had a support system. And that's also very important. One thing I'll talk about, plug into a community, a support system, because the stories you hear around are those that will motivate you. The statistics there, it will tell, oh, you need this number of interviews, that and that. It's there for a purpose. But then it's the stories that you hear and the ones you can relate to that will really push you to believe in yourself first. So that when you are sitting on that seat and you are being interviewed, you talk differently, you talk with some confidence. So that's all that I have for now. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. And I'd like to just...
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Dano. Someone is not on mute and talking. Please make sure you mute yourself, please.
But every time the phone is connected to the car.
Dr. Sylvia, thank you so much. All right, listen, thank you so much, Dr. Danso, Dr. De Silva. You've given us a lot of nuggets, a lot of things to think about. The chat is lit. Lots of questions going on in the chat. And I encourage you also, Dr. Aveni, if we can get in the chat, there's some GPSF questions in there as well that we want to answer. But Dr. Amfonsa, you and I are both program directors, at least I'm a former program director, and I'm listening to them and there's some things going on in my head because it's different perspectives. Program directors look at things very differently, and it's important for you to get into the brain of a program director. Okay, we've heard lots of good advice, but you've got to get into the brain of the people who will be making decisions about the application. So I want to bring Dr. Amfonsa in, and what I really want to know, Doc, how do you even go through an application? Okay, what is your process? How do you I don't want to use the word because it might sound harsh, but this is the reality. How do you eliminate? As a program director, I received 1,800 applications. I'm only looking for 8. I'm only going to interview, 200 out of the 15. So there's a process we go through, and it's important for you to know that process too, because that's going to tell you what's most important. So Dr. Amfonsa, get us into the brain of a program director. How do you go through an application? What are you looking for in terms of scores, in terms of that personal statement? And I'd love to add a few more after you've gone ahead. Doc, please share some secrets with us.
So good evening to everyone. Hope you are enjoying the forum so far. Thanks you to all of the panelists. Thank you, Dr. Pencil, for doing a great job hosting this, Dr. Abanye. So, folks, I've heard such great advice, from all of the various speakers that have spoken ahead of me. And now I'm going to bring you my perspective from the other side and from Dr. Pencil's side, right, as program directors. So if you are really paying attention, you will understand, you will hear that certain themes keeps recurring, right? People are saying the same concepts over and over again, which means the quality of your USMLE scores, the quality of your experience, be it a US experience or non-US, whether it's clinical or non-clinical. We'll delve into that a little bit further later on. Other supporting details that you may have to your application, your letters of recommendation, the strength of it, the who's writing your letters, how reputable are they, the research that you've done, the research you're involved in a publication that you've had, and so on and so forth. And then we'll touch a little bit about the interview, which is a very critical component in the application process, right? And that's probably the step where everything can fall apart, right? So as a program director, we look at, like Dr. Pencil said, I was a program director in Miami where I had probably 4 times as many fellows as I have now, right? So I receive, and being in Miami, having a nice weather and being in a very fun city to live in, thousands and thousands of applications, right? Probably 3-4 times a month that I'm receiving now. So, but we have to have a way to sort of sift through that and get the quote unquote quality applicants, right? So pain management is a subspecialty that you can reach through from anesthesia, PM&R, neurology, ER, psychiatry. So you can see how competitive it can be, even within the specialty of anesthesia. And I'm an anesthesiologist by primary training. So we take the aptitude of that. People, if someone has courage to apply to a pain management fellowship, they must really think they're very top of the crop, right? So everyone that's applying think they are the best. And then of this batch, we have to select even the best of the best to give them an interview or a chance to train with us, right? So when we look at your scores, we are looking at the scores in terms of how well did you perform, for instance, the first time around. Why do we do that? Because when you go through a residency program or a fellowship program, you have to still go through at standardized tests, right? And these show your capability to be able to perform clinically. So, you know, even though it's not a perfect system, it's a way that we sort of use to take away folks that we think have a higher likelihood of performing and doing well on standardized exams and keeping their respective specialty certifications in the future, right? So if for a program director, I'm more likely to pick a candidate that has performed very well in USMLE 1 and 2, perhaps, prior to it being pass-fail, than someone who has struggled through it, right? Doesn't mean that person who has struggled will not become an excellent physician in the future. Absolutely not. But unfortunately, this flawed system only affords me the ability to say that most likely the person that studied hard, took it serious, did well, took resources to heart and performed well at a higher level first time or second time around is more likely to do well than the person who is just sort of swinging it, right? It seems, right? When it comes to experience, we look at people who have been in touch with US-based experience, right? Why? Because we are going to be working and training in the US system, right? So we as program directors want to know that you're going to be able to know the nuances and be able to navigate the clinical environment well and perform well, right? The harshness of residency and fellowship training, are you up for that, right? I mean, residency is not just a physical, it's also about mental aptitude. And we want to be able to know that you're going to come into the residency or the fellowship and be able to survive, right? And be able to provide and excel clinically, right? So having a proper structured experience prior to you starting residency speaks volumes than, for instance, saying, oh, I did a shadowing experience where I followed a guy around for like a day or two or a week, right? Or like I heard, people mention the word observership. For some reason, I may be biased. I did my medical school training, my residency, my fellowship, everything in the US. That word observership, it doesn't sit right with me as a program director, right? There's something about it. There's something about it that says that it's a little bit inferior than a proper clinical rotation, right? So you as a candidate, you might be selling yourself short by using certain terminology, right? That's why it speaks volumes perhaps to get someone on the US side, a program director, a staff member, faculty, someone in academics to interview you, to see the kind of vocabulary that you're going to say and things that you're going to put in your letters and your CV, because you may be selling yourself short, Let's say you did 2-3 months of a proper experience at a US community hospital, but you think it's not a big level 1 trauma center, so it's not a big thing. So you write it as a clinical observership or something like that. And we're like, no, this is inferior, right? This person probably never touched the patient. Well, as an anesthesiologist, if you've never seen someone even get intubated, if you've never even touched a Mac or Miller blade or these instruments we play with, but you're telling me you're so interested in anesthesia and that you've dreamt about it since you came out of the baby, no, your application is going to the side somewhere, because I know you're lying, right? It just doesn't add up. So speak up for yourself. If you did something well, this is your chance to brag by not bragging, right? Get letters from people who you really, really work with, people who've gotten a chance to get to know you. If I'm reading a letter, I read thousands and thousands of letters. I've written hundreds and hundreds of letters. So I know what goes into a letter and I know what to look for. I know when someone has spent a lot of time and done well, the energy I'm going to put in that letter, because I'm trying to communicate to that other program director, listen, this is not a person that just came through the doors. This is a person you want to take seriously. This is a person I will take under X and Y, Z circumstances, right? So as a program director, I know what I'm expecting. So if I see that is a letter from someone that you sort of just spend a couple of days with, I know the language, right? And then I'll read it and put it to the side. So don't pick someone because of their title or because they're from the same country as you or you went to the same school. Pick someone that you really, really, truly worked with. Get your hands on some letters, some research. If specialty related, even better. But any research shows that you are interested in clinical, advancement of the field, so it looks well. Final thought: the interview. I heard someone say the interview means that you're almost in. Absolutely not. The interview can also mean that you're almost out. All right, because the interview is that step where you can articulate everything that I've read on the paper to me in 3D. So if you come and you give me demeanor or actions or words that negate everything I just read about you, that interview, you just crushed everything you just worked for, right? So it's very important. It behooves me to say that practice, practice, practice with the interviewer. Record yourself if you must. Check your words, check the things that you want to communicate, and don't think that the interview means, oh, I'm almost in. So you come in with this, sort of, ego or bravado that, no. It's a privilege, right? And so don't come and waste the program director's time because they could have put somebody else there. So it's a privilege for you to demonstrate how well of a candidate you are and how good of a position you can be. But don't take it as, oh, they must think I'm really, really good. That's why I'm here. So let me just icing on the cake. Absolutely not. Okay. So I'll leave it short and I'll be here for some questions, folks. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Ooh, Dr. Amponsa, I'm over here having an amen, hallelujah moment because everything you are sharing, you are speaking a program director's mind. And please, I hope we're all listening and paying attention. So very important. There are a lot of questions in the chat about U.S. clinical experience. Maybe let's spend a few minutes really, entering and delving into that. And Dr. Amponsa said exactly what I said. That word observership does not sit well. Okay, if your application has 3 observerships, 6 months of observership, a year of observership, all the program director is seeing is you don't know, you didn't have any experience. So it's hugely important. This is why I said do not call it an observership. Okay, find someone who will let you have a little bit more clinical interaction. Now, if you're a medical student, it's easier to get into a rotation in a hospital. But for many IMGs, you're doing it after med school, right? Which makes it harder to get a rotation in a program because of the whole insurance and all that kind of stuff. Your best bet, find a clinician, find someone in private practice. Google Ghanaian doctor, San Antonio. I know, find them. There are people out there. There are people in GPSF who are willing to take you in, but you've got to do that background work, reach out to them, okay, and get that experience. Call it an externship, call it whatever it is, but do not call it an observership. And when you're there, don't be an observer. And Dr. Amponsa said something else that I hadn't heard anyone else bringing it up. The whole point of your U.S. clinical experience is to get a letter. The two things are tied, okay? Because you're looking for someone who can attest to saying, yeah, this person might be an IMG, but they know how to function in the US. That's really what you're looking for, right? So that clinical experience, out of that experience, you've got to be able to get someone who will vouch for you. Here's one other thing before I throw it out to our panelists. When you're working with that person, 2 weeks in, you've got to ask them, can you write me a strong letter? You have to ask the question, very specific, not can you write me a letter? Most people will say yes. The worst thing you can do for yourself is get a letter that's not strong. And like Dr. Amponsa said, we read all those letters. And we can tell a strong letter from a weak letter. You want to ask the person you're working with, can you write me a strong letter? If the answer is no, fair game. Grab your pen, grab your paper, ask why. What do I need to do to get a strong letter? You've got 2 weeks to fix it. And get yourself a strong letter. All right, we beat U.S. clinical experience all the way down. Please, if you have more questions about that, put that in the chat so we can make sure that we're answering those questions. Dr. Amponsa, I've got to come back to you on this one. That the essay. Do you read every essay? Are there some applications that you don't even bother reading the essay? So by the time you get to the essay, what are you really looking for in that essay? Talk to me a little bit more about that. Talk to us about that.
So for me, the essay is sort of like your personal avatar, right? You trying to tell me why this person is going to do it well in my specialty, or this is what your moment to tell me why I should invite you for a personal chat. essentially, right? So if the essay starts off and it's boring me, it was like very mundane, or so I came out of my mother's womb and it was raining and I was no, 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 no. I've heard that a million times. I know for a fact you're lying, right? No, tell me why you're so special, why you're different. Tell me something about something else that I haven't seen on that paper, on that CV, right? Give me the essence. Why, you really, really are cut out for this, right? Through experiences. Tell me stories, right? And I think I read somewhere or one of the panelists said something about stories. Yes, pitch to me, create a movie for me. Tell me why, through stories, put my mind to why you're going to be a great anesthesiologist or you're going to be a great pain physician, right? I cannot read it and be like, yeah, I've heard this before. All right, because it's not going to strike me to say, all right, you know what? Send it to my secretary, invite this person for an interview. I'm not going to send that email, right? Because there are times, remember, I'm a part of a faculty, so even though I'm a program director, we all vote, right? So I have to go to battle for you. So if I have 3 or 4 other faculty members that are on the fence with you and they don't think you're going to be great, and I really, really think that you're going to do well, well, what do I have to stand up for, right? So tell me something that I'm going to say, yeah, this person needs to come in, or I'm going to go against all my faculty members and go for this candidate, right? So it has to demonstrate some story, something that says, yes, I'm ready for this. I understand it. I've spent time around this. This is a calling for me. This is something that I've been wanting to do. This is something that I'm going to keep doing, even if I don't match for 1, 2 times. I am coming back. That candidate is who I'm looking for.
Awesome. Well said. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I often say, the statement has to make me want to meet you. By the time I finish reading that statement, that's what should say to me, oh, wow, I want to meet that person. That's what gets you an interview. The first line of the statement should make me want to read the whole thing. I mean, I'll read the whole thing because I have to, but I want to read it because it's exciting, not because I have to read it. And by the time I'm done, I need to be left with that sense of, oh, wow, this would be a cool person. I want to meet them. That's what gets you an interview. Panelists, where did you do your clinical experience? This is coming up so much in the chat. And that question is coming up. Should I wait till I can get to Harvard or Princeton, or is it okay to do it in a small community hospital? Dr. Danso, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so I applied to an agency online, and I looked into their rotations, pediatric rotations and location, and I chose a location that was close to my family because then at least accommodation would be sorted. Because if you are going to a place where you may be far away from family, then you need to, cough up some extra funds for accommodation. So that's what I did. And for the most part, those of us in Ghana, you only get like a month or 2 months of leave. So that's pretty much how much US clinical experience you can have, technically speaking, unless of course you're already living in the US. If you are actively working in Ghana, you can get like 1 month, 2 months maximum. And so you look at okay, getting a visa appointment if you don't have a visa, to get a B1, B2 visa before you start applying to some of these things, because some of these applications, they are not refundable. So you don't want to apply, pay your money, get to the point where now you need to go for a visa interview and you go and you are denied and you lose your money. Okay, so I mean that's what I did.
Awesome. Thank you. Dr. De Silva, where did you do your rotations?
Right. So when I was still, I don't know if I'm unmuted. Yes, I'm unmuted. So when I was a medical student, I did 1 rotation in the US. That's how I actually got my visa, because it's easier to get a visa as a medical student, because in the process of getting a visa, you need to prove ties to your country, right? And that's to everyone who plans to apply for a visa. As a student, for those who are still students, it's probably the best time to apply for a visa, because you most likely will get it, because no one will doubt that you'll come back to Ghana to complete your degree. So take advantage of that. That's what I did. I did a rotation, but it was in psychiatry, which wasn't very relevant to, because I applied in general surgery, as everyone knows. But after that, I, just like Dr. Danso did, I reached out to an agency, online an agency that organizes rotations, and I got 2 rotations in Chicago doing that. They were not observerships, and that's something I would like to touch on as well. A lot of people kind of shoot themselves in the leg actually by writing observerships, and really doesn't do them, any good. As long as you saw a patient, you took history, you examined the patient, you assisted in the OR, this is not an observership, right? So do not write that as an observership because it's not going to help you. The rotations I did in Chicago, I was, involved in patient care, not fully, obviously, but I was attending rounds. I was assisting in the OR. I was seeing patients, taking their history, examining them, reporting to the attending. And that's what I wrote in my ERAS application. I wrote everything I did. And my letter writers also touched on that in what they wrote, the recommendation they wrote for me. So that is something you should please keep in mind. But yes, that's how I initially came to the US through the agency. And another thing you could do that helps and help me as well is to reach out to the people family. It may not apply to everyone, but it may apply to a few people, and you should take advantage of that. I knew someone whose father was an orthopedic surgeon, and I just reached out to him, hey, can I shadow your father for a few weeks? And initially my intent was to have an observership, but during the experience, it was a lot more than that because I was scrubbing in, I was seeing patients with him and all that. And that was also really, really helpful, and it was free. So please leverage the people just like, Dr. Pencil and Dr. Amponsa mentioned. Find a clinician. It could be a private practice. The experience I'm talking about here was in a private orthopedic clinic. So please take advantage of that. And these are some of the ways you can get these rotations. Another one is, again, Dr. Pencil touched on that, is to, do your background work. Go on Google, search Ghanaian doctors in my area. Look for, it doesn't even have to be Ghanaian doctors, really anyone that can help. Reach out to them, send them those emails. You may send 50 emails or 100 emails or more, but guess what? You only need one or two. So if you can get those experiences, it's going to help you a lot.
Awesome. Thank you. Dr. Amponsa, similar question, but I'll give it a slight tinge. An observership at Harvard versus an ICU rotation in an unknown hospital somewhere. A letter of recommendation from Obama, who clearly don't know you, okay, versus a letter of recommendation from an unknown doctor who clearly worked with you and can vouch for you. Which one means more to you as a program director?
So as a program director, I mean, the magnitude of your letter or your experience, it has to be something that's tangible and palpable, you know. I mean, if you get a letter from Obama because of some, somewhere, some connection you have, versus a letter from someone you really know, you have spent like 2-3 months with you, I will know. See, we know as program directors off the bat when you are so-called name dropping. We know, and nothing annoys us more than the person who comes to our interview date name dropping, right? Or because you know that your program director went to school with somebody in your from that you know, and then you come in and then you lead with that. Don't ever do that. Don't ever do that. Let that organically come up, right? Let them say, they say, oh, you work with so and so from University of Washington. Oh yeah, I trained there as well, and then let them bring it up. Fine, if it does come up, but don't lead with that, right? So if you did a rotation, an ICU rotation, where I know as an anesthesiologist, the rigors of taking an ICU rotation and doing call, perhaps 24-hour call, and these things, what it takes for a person to do well, and you get a letter from an ICU director after spending a month or 6 weeks with them, that speaks volumes to me as a program director than you coming up with some flashy letter from Harvard, from somebody that, you just like was doing like, research through virtual research with or something, No, right? Post-COVID, there's been a lot of administrative and hospital reform, and that does not allow a lot of the non-US based students to do clinical rotation at certain hospitals. So that's understandable. As a program director, we're aware of this. The ACGME let us know about these things. So getting with a community physician or private practice physician where you can have some meaningful experience, keyword being meaningful, will further your application more than just trying to stand around some big name hospital just to say I did some work at Brady Memorial or something like that.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Lots of nuggets here. Thank you so much. Dr. Amponsa has used the phrase, I know you're lying. He's used it a few times, right? I can't tell you enough as a program director how unsettling it is, the lies that people tell, either in an essay or in an interview. One of the things that's been so jarring this year, I don't know if you followed the news from ECFMG, everything that's happened in Nepal, where everyone who took that exam, step one and step two, people have lost their residency spots because of cheating in one part of a nation. Everyone from Nepal, they've been invalidated. And that's just mind-boggling. So I just want to remind us, don't lie, don't cheat. Don't, I can't say it any other way. Don't lie, don't cheat. And I read some of the articles around that. They basically studied some of the answers. And if you had a higher percentage correct in those questions that leaked, then you were part of the invalidation. They had a way of trying to figure that out. I've known applicants, people I've helped, they go into the interview and they lie. Don't do that, okay? Tell the truth. Speak up for yourself, all right? And things will go well for you. I saw a question in here from Dr. Boateng asking about being a medical assistant. Does that count as U.S. clinical experience? Being a medical assistant. I don't know if any of our panelists want to go ahead and take that. I have my own thoughts, but I'll let you start. Dr. De Silva, what do you think of that?
It depends on what you were doing as a medical assistant, I think. What were you involved in? Were you seeing patients? Were you just showing the patient the room? If you were just showing the patient the room, then I don't think that will help you. If you're taking vitals, if you were examining the patient prior to the doctor seeing the patient, then that might be different. So it really depends on what you were involved in, I think. But it's definitely something that will be useful in your CV for sure. But as to comparing that to, for instance, someone that had a research fellowship or that had a sub-internship or a very extensive externship, I think it ranks a bit lower.
Dr. Amponsa, you're off camera, so I'll assume you're not available. Oh, there you are. What would you say to that? Being a medical assistant.
No, I mean, I echo those sentiments. I mean, it's all about, so we're not evil people, right? As program directors, we're really just looking for candidates that are going to survive and do well in the rigors of a medical environment, right? So, and we know about physician burnout. We know what's at the end of that tunnel, right? Medical students think they know, but they don't really know because they haven't been through the tunnel. We know what's at the end of the tunnel. So we're trying our best to get physicians that are going to survive and not burn out. Right. So having a quality medical experience is important. So don't try to lie about what you did, right? To sway us. You're gonna fail, and somewhere along the process if you don't take the steps that's necessary. If medicine is not cut out for you, don't jump into it for the wrong reasons. Right. So having been an MA and you go there and you're just taking vitals and you're speaking with the physician, you're right attached to their hip. That tells us that you have some insight and depth into this field and you know what you're signing up for. Right. So that tells us that you did your homework. That's all that is telling us. Right. It doesn't really tell us too much about how you're going to fare in medical school or the residency. It just tells us you know what you're signing up for because you understand. Right. So what you do again is more important than just, actually the title, because you can even be a PA and just sit there and not really do much.
Exactly. Really good point. So things like being a scribe, things like being a medical assistant, those are all great experiences. They add to your CV, but they're in and of themselves, that's not enough for the U.S. clinical experience. Okay, you need to be seeing patients, making clinical decisions, making diagnostic decisions, okay, in order to be effective and to really get across in your application that I am a strong candidate. I can survive in the American health system. I will do well in this health system. We're coming on about 7:10, 7:15. We have a hard stop at 8. I think we've tried to go through most of the questions that I'm seeing in the chat. And so that's really good. We're getting ahead of the game. I want to hear from Dr. Amponsa. What are some of the mishaps? What are some of the things that you have seen that are absolute no-nos for you as a program director looking at an application or in an interview? What are some of those things that these amazing applicants should absolutely not do?
Other than it has to be something glaring, right? For instance, you cannot come into a residency application and I sit on, I sat on as a medical student, I sat on as a residency, as a resident, as a fellow with selection committees, and now as a staff member. Don't come in and say that you wanted to go into anesthesia because you know they have a good lifestyle and they make a lot of money, right? Don't be that bold, or for the lack of a better word, that stupid, right? Because you may think it's funny, or you may think you're being candid, or you're being honest, or whatever, but that's the wrong thing to do, right? So don't tell the program director that you're going into the program for the wrong reasons, right? Because you've seen your father do this, or your mother wanted you to do this, and so on and so forth, right? 2, don't lie if you failed an exam and fabricate it and say, this is what it was, and then because we will always find out. We know we will always find out, right? If you get, this is something I've also come across. If you get dislodged, or if you get kicked out of a program, or let's say you left family practice and now you go to internal medicine, don't lie about what happened. Do not lie. One thing program director love to do is get up on the phone and talk to another program director, and we will get all the tea. You understand me? We will tell everything. Okay, so if you got kicked out because you were writing notes on patients you didn't see, or you were doing procedures that you weren't qualified to do and whatnot, find a way, because it's gonna come up. Is that pink elephant in the room? Find a way to address it. I've made some immature decisions. I did this and this and that, but I've learned from that time. I've evolved, I've transformed. I've gone through some coaching, blah, blah, blah. I'm a better person. I'm a better candidate. Here I am now. That speaks to maturity. That speaks to development of character. That will speak to more likely that we're going to move forward with you as a candidate. Then you come up in there and say, oh, that program director didn't like me. They don't like Black people over there. They don't like minorities over there. No, because as soon as we hang up, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pick up that phone call. Right, and medicine is such a small world. A lot of these program directors know each other. We're on first name basis. We have each other's cell phone numbers. We meet at conferences. We meet at national organizations. So we it's no problem at all to just send an email. Oh, by the way, call me on my cell phone, and we'll get everything. Right? Don't lie about anything about your application. If there's something that went wrong, if you got kicked out of a program, if you failed an exam, if you did something that you know is going to come up, be prepared to talk about it and be honest. And give a reason what you've learned from it and how you've advanced from that point. That's what we're interested in, right? That you're not stagnant, that you're growing. Okay. Watch your vernacular. We live in a very sensitive environment, modern society now. Sensitive topics around people's sexuality and people's gender. Be very careful when you discuss these things. Be prepared to discuss them. Post-COVID era issues, they're always hot topics. We're going to throw you a scenario, a person had COVID and this and that, what are you going to do? So prepare, be cognizant of what's happening in the community, and be prepared to discuss these difficult topics, okay?
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm trying to go through the chat to make sure we've hit all the questions. There's something in there. I think it's Regina. Oh, let's see. There's someone who had a question about how do you show the clinical experiences that you've had? Like, how do you demonstrate that in your essay? Let's see. Is there something you get to show you did all the things you say you did during your U.S. clinical experience? I'll give you a quick answer to that in the essay. Tell me about a patient. Don't forget we're clinicians, right? I love a medical dilemma. I see something, I want to see, well, what happened with the patient, right? So talk about an experience. That's what tells me, okay, you were there. You weren't just observing. Okay, write about an interesting patient you encountered and how you solved the problem. Dr. Amponsa mentioned mistakes. If you failed an exam, if there's something in your application, but you can talk about it in a meaningful way that conveys that you learned, you grew from that experience, okay, that gets the attention of the person reading. Any other thoughts on that? How else can people show their clinical experience? How can they show that, whether it's in the letter or an interview, however you want to put it? Dr. Dano, so we haven't heard your voice in a while. How can people demonstrate that U.S. clinical experience?
Yeah, so thank you, Dr. Penso. So like you said and Dr. Mponsa said, in America, and that's one part of the cultural adjustments. I remember last year I went for 2 conferences, and I presented posters, and almost every time after listening to my poster, the person asks, "Tell me about your story." And there's a way you tell the story when it's genuine. People will know that this story is genuine. So you need to write about, first of all, you need to sit down, be introspective about your experiences and find out those ones where you can highlight your strength and like relive the experience. Because when you relive the experience and you are asked about it on the interview, when you are saying it, you talk with a different demeanor. It's like you can, when someone is telling a story and it's a bit fabricated, you can know. But when it's genuine, the person, the facial expression, everything, you just can sense how the story unfolded, and you can actually like relive it. The interviewer can relive it with the interviewee as you are telling the story. So what I'll say is be introspective, get your experiences in order, because for the most part, we work before we are applying to residency. So for at least IMGs, we have rich experiences, but we need to sit down and relive those experiences, put them on paper, write it. That's when you get in touch with a mentor, they can help you tailor that experience to kind of like tell a story where, like the star approach, what was the setting, what was your task, what did you do, what did you learn from it? And because it's your story and you actually is genuine when you are telling it, the interviewer can know that you are telling something that is real. So I think that's what I did. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. There's a question from way back. I'm sorry I missed it. The question has to do with the two parts of the question. It has to do with grades in medical school, and do they matter? Does it matter if it's just pass fail? And then another part of the question is USMLE versus what they're learning in med school. And sometimes what you're learning in med school is not what's happening in USMLE world. Should you just study USMLE stuff for the USMLE? How important are the grades? Any of our panelists, you can take that.
All right, I would like to address that actually. So yeah, I saw that question a while back and I wanted to address it during the Q&A. Do med school grades matter? Yes, they do. But probably not as much as you think, in my opinion. And I will explain why, right? You don't need to have honors everywhere, like, in all your exams and, always be the best student. It helps, absolutely, it does help. But do you need that? Probably not. You need to know also, if you're applying to a super competitive specialty, for example, you're applying to plastic surgery, dermatology, you probably want to have really good grades in those in your medical school because that will help. An example, for instance, in my case is one course that I actually failed in medical school. And I was actually asked about it during one of my interviews. So just like I said in my introduction, you will be asked about anything in your application. So be prepared, be well versed with anything at all. So I was asked about that. It didn't take me by surprise because I knew it was part of my application. And I had to explain what happened and explain how I learned from it. So you just don't want to say that yes, I failed and that's it. You want to kind of turning it to an experience and how you learned from it, how it made you a better person, and how you put in measures to prevent that from happening again. So bottom line is med school grades matter. Do your best to get good grades, and try not to fail any grades. The Trying to look at the exam, sorry. The other part of that question was, will you be affected if you have no honors? You will not be, not really. Of course, if you have honors, it's gonna be to your advantage, but it's not going to be held against you if you have no honors. Remember, it's a whole application. It's not just your medical school performance evaluation they're looking at. They're looking at your personal statement. They're looking at your letter of recommendations. They're looking at all of that. So it's not one thing that's going to make you sink. It's a whole package that you need to work on everything. The other part of your question was, should you ditch, using your words, should you ditch your medical school curriculum, books and whatever, and just focus on the USMLE materials? I don't think that's a wise thing to do, because it's two different environments. It's the US system and then it's Ghana, and the focus in medical school in those two countries are very different. You need to be able to pass your exams. So please take your courses seriously, and you don't need to quote unquote ditch everything, right? of course, it's going to help if you, because there is a great overlap between what we learn in Ghana and what we learn in the US anyway. So regardless of whatever you use to learn, you're still, at the end of the day, it's about having the information in your head. So I would say do whatever you have to do to pass your exams and pass them well. But when it comes to time to prepare for the USMLE exams, you may need to tweak your approach a little bit and use different resources for that.
Thank you. Dr. Ampasa, did you have something to add there?
Yeah, so as a program director, I do look at medical school grades, but again, without too much emphasis, right? Because to me, I think all they say is that you're good locally, right? But how are you nationally, right? So as imperfect as it is, the USMLEs and these steps exams, the idea is to sort of put everyone on an even playing field, right? Everybody can have different degrees of difficulty with their medical school curricula, but when we put everyone on the same playing field, how well will you perform? That's the whole idea or the concept of this, right? So, but having said that, one caveat: if you come telling me you want to be a surgeon since the way you were born, but then you failed anatomy, I mean that help me explain that, right? That doesn't add up. That should be passion. It should be reproductive, and it should be palpable throughout your entire story, right? And then briefly, someone said, "How do you deal with a gap?" That was a question that sort of popped up. Explain it, right? Don't dodge it. Don't go around it, because guess what? We see it. We're probably just waiting for you to bring it up, okay? And if you don't bring it up, guess what? We're gonna bring it up. So be prepared to talk about it, so that you're not fumbling through it, as under pressure and under time constraints. So what I did was, then it sounds like you're lying, right? So know that if you took a year off, if you took 2 years off, if it was intentional to do research or to do whatever, explain it. If it was unintentional because you had a death in the family, or you're a married man or woman and you had to go work and care for family, just explain it. Don't make an excuse for it, because we want to see continuity. We want to see you go to med school 4 years, bang it up, and come out, right? Without any unnecessary or less, research or other degrees. But if you took off to get an MBA, MPH, or whatever, just explain it. Be prepared. Don't lie, and don't try to jump around it, because we're going to see that if you jump around it, you're hiding something there. That doesn't look good.
Awesome. Thank you. Well said. Well said. Listen, we've talked about a lot of things. The score, it matters. Okay. And Dr. Amponsa made a good point. It helps to even the playing field. All right. So the scores really do matter. Your experience, that U.S. clinical experience, it matters. You've got to take the time, get a couple of months under your belt. The letters of recommendation, they matter. One thing I haven't heard us say so far, as many letters as you can get from people in the U.S., the better. If all your letters are coming from out of the country, they don't carry a stronger weight. Okay, so again, tie that U.S. clinical experience to those letters of recommendation, really important. And then that personal statement, make me want to meet you. All right, make me want to invite, because if I'm reading the statement, that means, okay, the rest of the applications, it's all right, because otherwise I wouldn't be reading your statement. Okay, I wouldn't even get that far. So if I've gotten that far, all right, now make me want to meet you. Tell me something exciting about this person and why I should want to spend the next 3, 4, 5 years with you in my program. Hugely, hugely important. So, should we all run out there and get MPHs and do all these other things? How valuable are those experiences for the application? Any of our panelists want to touch on that? Is that the big thing that's going to get someone in? Costs a lot of money too. What do you think about that MPH year?
Okay, Dr. Amposa, you go ahead.
As PD, we know, at the pencil, we know all the sort of pathways and ways that people do to sort of impress, program directors and chairmen and whatnot, so do if it is necessary, if it supports the field you're going into, if it supports the career path that you've chosen for yourself. But don't do it because solely because you think it's going to impress us, because it's not, right? It's not. It's not going to impress us as well as you think it's going to impress, right? If you go to infectious disease, you want to go to global medicine, you want to go into, family outreach, whatever, and so MPH naturally makes sense in that field. Absolutely, yeah, we expect that. It makes sense. If you want to go into entrepreneurship, you want to go to, you go get an MBA, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But if it was like, well, I didn't match first year, I didn't match second year, so I decided to go get an MPH. Especially if you say something like that, definitely don't say that, right? If you go do an MPH, say you have interest somehow in public health and this is where you wanted to entertain, fine. But don't just tell us that you want to get it because you wanted to make your application stronger, because that just doesn't look good. Okay? That just means that you're wasting resources. That actually tells me that you have bad judgment. Because you can spend that 1 year doing research, you can spend that 1 year going on a post-bac program, whatever way you can make really, truly make yourself stronger than trying to look flashy for a program director.
Awesome. Dr. Danso, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I had something to, so I'd like to just add a little bit to, so Dr. Amposa made a very wonderful statement here that at the end of the day, all that is seen in either the personal statement, letter of recommendation, all that, when you come to the interview, now there's a time for you to put everything together to let him know that he likes you, he likes to work with you. And so we should understand that all these things that we are doing, it gets you the interview. But when you get the interview, it's different. Like your personality is what comes out. Like you can be an A student in med school and all that, and then you come on the interview and your attitude, it just gives off someone who doesn't exude, team player, you're not a team player, just want to go off all by yourself and you think so highly of yourself and you make statements that kind of like are condescending. All those things will just, throw you out of the batch. So that's one thing I wanted to add. Now, when it comes to the MPH, it got to a point I wanted to understand that pathway. So I talked to most of my friends in my med school class, like most of them, either Hopkins, Harvard, they're doing MPH. And I asked myself, like, why? So these are some of the things that I came to understand. Number one, MPH could be one of the ways to come into the US legally. Because you come on an F1 visa, at least once you are in the United States, you have the advantage of proximity. You can easily get access to maybe US clinical experience. You are affiliated to an institution where you have an institutional email. That's kind of like you can leverage on to get involved in research work. Number two, that's even outside your MPH, because you go to conferences and now you can have conversation with people and they can actually get you on research work. I remember there was a time I was trying to get research work, remote research with one of my virtual mentors. And she asked me what's my email address. And I said, well, I only have a Gmail address. And she said, no, you need an institutional email address. So that was when I realized the importance of institutional email addresses. Like Ghana, you don't have some, you work in Cape Coast and you still have a Gmail address. You don't have a Cape Coast institutional address. So sometimes it becomes difficult to get on certain projects that can sort of elevate you and put you into bigger rooms. Now, when you are thinking of doing an MPH, the first question you need to ask yourself is, of course, your end goal is getting to residency. The institution you are doing your MPH in, does it have a residency program that you are interested in? Number one. If the institution has, does it take IMGs? Because I have friends who went to Stanford, spent tons of months there, and they were never given an interview because it was like, Stanford. So then you are brokenhearted. It's because in a way, maybe you had different offers at different institutions that maybe you could have done an MPH in where they take IMGs. And so whilst you are in the institution, you can leverage your presence there and they get to know you and they can consider you. So if you are thinking about doing an MPH, if you've not done any of the steps, you are better off doing a 2-year MPH so that you give yourself that time. Because after the MPH, I also heard that, you need to, find a way to convert your visa. You don't want to be under that kind of pressure. So if you've not done any of the USMLE steps, you can consider doing a 2-year MPH program. That gives you that time to take the steps and, and work your way, build your network. If you've already taken maybe step 1 or step 2 in Ghana and you are thinking of doing an MPH, then you can go for the 1-year program. Where that one, you don't come and add more years to your year of graduation. And then lastly, always ask yourself, the institution that you are doing your MPH in, does it have a residency program? And do they take IMGs? Or else you'll be there and they will not still consider it because they don't take IMGs. So I think that's something that I would like to see.
Very good point. Very good point. I have one last question in there, but before that, I wanted to demystify something concerning the steps. Okay. So residency programs, fellowship programs are judged based on the pass rate for the boards. Okay. It's part of how programs are judged. And the reality of life is that past experiences are indicative of how things are going to be in the future. So if someone has struggled with standardized exams in the past, then the program sees you as a risk for the board exam in the future. So that's why people look at the step scores the way they do. It's why if you haven't taken the exam, study your behind off and pass it well. If you score a 250, nobody cares if you were honest, pass, or not during your med school grades, because they see that you functioned well on the step exam. Okay, so that's just to demystify why the USMLE matters so much to programs and why they're looking at it so closely. Now, the last question here is really important because it talks about other pathways, and it talks about IMGs with home country experience and how to leverage that experience in lieu of the 5-year cutoff that most programs have, where if you've graduated from med school more than 5 years, that oftentimes they won't look at you. What are some of those meaningful things that you could do in year 7? Someone would still look at you, would still look at that application. Any insights into that? What can you leverage? How can you still enter the system even though it's been more than 5 years?
I think I'll go first. So, when you get to the program review and selection, I think that is where everything comes together. You would realize that every program has their requirements. Some programs will say maybe our year of cutoff, some programs say we do not have a cutoff point. Some programs will say our cutoff is maybe 10 years, some say 5 years. I'm just talking about internal medicine and pediatrics. I'm very sure it's different for anesthesia. I'm very sure it's different for anesthesia or something like that. So you look at programs that fits your profile, because at the end of the day, you are spending money to apply. So look into those programs. Some programs use certain keywords. Applicants must, applicants should. So you ask yourself, okay, can this be an opportunity where I get in touch? And some programs give an email for inquiries. And I realize that that's one thing that, growing up in Ghana, are not naturally accustomed to making inquiries. It will shock you that you can make an inquiry and you get someone who will reply and give you all the information that you want, and even go to the point and say that, you know what, consider applying, we will, we'll be looking out for your application. The match cycle, sometimes amazing things happen. You just need to ask questions. So when you look at, and some programs even say that our cutoff is 2 years, but if you're already in clinical practice back home, we will consider you. So you need to look at the programs you are applying to, look at their requirements. And like Dr. Amponsa said, the way you write the experience, because I realized that, for the first time I applied as a medical officer, the way I wrote my experience, I thought, I need to write the highfalutin things. But then I realized that actually we are being hired to be interns. And as an intern, what is required of you is to be someone who can learn, collect information, obey instructions, be a team player. So if you write your experiences like you were running clinics, you were doing this surgery, they see you and they're like, we can't teach this old dog a new trick. So that's actually one of the problems that the programs have with older IMGs, because you write highfalutin things, thinking that, they'll be seen as, you are up there, so they want to consider you. No, you need to be able to tone your experiences down to the level of an intern. And so that's how, even with experiences, you can make advantage of your experience that you've had back home. And then on the interview, when they ask you, the way you answer questions show maturity, because you've worked, you know how patients behave, like maybe in the field of pediatrics, you know how parents behave, you know how the family unit is. It comes off from how you answer the question. So that's that's one way that you can also leverage, your experiences back home, the maturity that comes with it, and you show it in how you answer questions. Yeah.
Thank you. Dr. Amponsa, do you have something to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I think just be honest, and then if you think it's whatever the answer is going to be to your detriment or somehow adversely affect your application, just then go ahead and explain it, right? Reach out to the program coordinator, send emails to the program director. The program director may not. I get tons of emails, right? So I may not respond to you, but I'm probably gonna read your email, and if it's important, I'll take note. And when I do look at your application, I'll say, okay, this explains it. It's important. Don't lie, because we're also making decisions about what we're gonna do with your application, depending on the duration of time, right? And what you've been doing during that time. For instance, I sit on the medical school admissions committee, so if a student is telling me that it took 5 years and they were doing whatever, and if it makes sense, fine. It explains why there was absence. But that's different, right? As opposed to if I'm looking at a residency interview and a person tells me they were an anesthesiologist in India and they've been working as an attending anesthesiologist in India for 5-7 years. And now I'm going to bring them into my program as an intern. I have to make a decision because I want to know if there's going to be conflict or not, right? Because they have their own set of school of thought and how they practice. They've been doing this for X amount of years. Now someone's going to tell them and treat them as an intern. So don't lie, because that's going to always become an issue. Be honest, and if there's a reason why you want to explain it, then reach out.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, and talking about fellowships, that's such a good point. There are some fellowships here in the US that you can get into the fellowship and then come back and do part of your either internal medicine or pediatrics. GI is one of those. Neonatology is another of those. And people who can get into those are typically those who have done the same fellowship in another country. If it's an ACGME certified fellowship, even better in the last couple of years. But again, if you're in year 7 or so since graduating, but you've done a fellowship, usually that's a plus to get in to either your regular internship or to come in and match. Many fellowship programs are not filling. So they too are looking for people in the international space who can come in at that fellow level. But to pass the boards in the US, you would still have to go back and do at least 2 years of general, either internal medicine or pediatrics, depending on the program you're looking at. It is 7:38. We have touched on a lot of topics. There's a lot in the chat and a lot of answers in the chat. We may not have talked about it openly, but the answers are out there so you can see lots of questions about old letters of recommendation, and there's some thoughts in there about how to get updated letters of recommendation so you're not relying on a letter that's 2 years old to try to make your application. Dr. Benye, I don't see you on camera. I'm trying to talk till I see you so I can hand over to you, but before she takes over, 30 seconds or less. Final thoughts, Dr. Danso, then Dr. De Silva, and then Dr. Amponsa will give you the final words.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Penso, Dr. Amponsa, Dr. Benye. I think what I would like to say here is don't look at the outcomes, although the outcomes of the match is a binary, it's either you match or you don't match. Don't look at it as a success and failure, because sometimes time just it takes time for things to fall into place. And so you need to, once you can understand that, you give yourself the grace to be able to bounce back if you do not match. Because truth be told, when you go into the cycle the first time and you do not match, the next time you go into the cycle, now you become aware of certain programs that you thought were out of your reach, but then you know someone who has similar credentials like you, who even interviewed and matched. So then you start to believe in yourself as to what you bring to the table. Because for the most part, we are starting, as a first person applicant, you always want to play safe. That's something out there, but give yourself the grace to, to talk to people, to learn from their experiences, to learn from what they did that helped them get interviews in certain places, and how you can also improve your application. if you don't match the first time, all the things that went wrong can help you make things right eventually. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Naso, and thank you, Dr. Pencil, Dr. Amponsa. I have matched. I have learned quite a bit from you today, so I appreciate that. My final thoughts will be that it's and I shared that in the slides I presented at the beginning. It is a marathon, not a sprint. So you're in for the long run, and you need to start getting used to uncertainty because you're going to have a lot of that, like throughout, lots of uncertainties from would I get a response from this email I sent? Will I get a visa when I apply? Will I match? How many programs should I apply for? And so on and so forth. Which visa will I get? And it's on and on and on. So you need to get used to it, get comfortable with that uncertainty because it's not going away. But that being said, it doesn't mean you should, give up because of that. The other thing I want to touch on is, and I've had some friends tell me that, it's going to take 5 years, 7 years. I'm still in medical school. It's going to take this long to prepare for my exams and write. And I'm going to be, 30, 33, 35. And my response to that is, yes, that is true. But guess what? You're going to be 35 anyway. Right. And if you don't start working on these things now, you're going to be 35 and regretting decisions you could have made, now. So don't look at the time aspect, but look at it as, an investment into your own future. And regardless of whether you match or not, you are still going to come out of it as a better person, regardless. I strongly believe in that. So just some encouragement to anyone who is considering applying to residency in the US. It is not an easy journey, but it is highly rewarding. That's what I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And Dr. Ampansa, before your final thought, someone wants to know how they can boost their application for anesthesia since it's very competitive. So they want to hear it from you. What do they do to get in? And also, Dr. Vinyi, there's a note in there about GPSF advocacy, if you can answer that as well. Dr. Ampansa.
So for anesthesia, it's becoming competitive, rightfully so. But even for the U.S. medical students are also struggling to get in. So you have to come above and beyond, right? Which is why clinical experience is important, right? I'm the people who are at my school are trying to get my attention, and you're coming in from an outside experience, and you're trying to get my attention. So I need to really, really get to know you. So if you want to go into a program, select a program that you're really interested in. Find out if they take IMGs for experience, for rotational experience, and go there. Show them your grit, right? Go there, work your butt off, get into clinical research experiences, try to see if you can write some papers, be volitional in everything that you do while you're there. Get the program director to meet with you if you can. If you get a letter out of it, even better. Of course, all the things that we've said, great scores, great letters, research, but with anesthesia, most importantly, you got to make sure that you show clinical experience, a great letter from someone with a reputable, background, and having some papers does not hurt. Okay. Lastly, for the folks that you are applying, listen, everyone is going to have a different story to tell. Everyone's story is going to take different amount of time. But the point is, do you have it in you to keep going? Okay. You have to be intentional about this. Nothing that you're going to do in this medical journey is going to be easy. Internship is not going to be easy. Residency is not going to be easy. Fellowship is not going to be easy. Once you get past all those hurdles, your practice is not going to be easy. You're going to be under pressure from insurances to see X amount of patients. You're going to be under scrutiny from medical boards and so on and so forth. So this is just a beginning of obstacles that you're going to be facing. So just get this done. No one can do it for you. Get in the driver's seat, and this is going to be recorded. It has a ton of gems in there, packed into an hour and a half. Watch it over and over and over. All you need to know is right here. You don't need another guru to tell you this. You don't need another book to tell you this, right? You've got an organization that did it to you for free. Watch it and execute, okay? And if it's not year one, it's going to be year two. If it's not year two, it's going to be year three. All right, guys? I'll see you at the conference. I'll put our contact information there. Signing off.
Thank you, Dr. Mfonsa. Listen, Dr. Vinyi, we might need a whole other session about the interview because we didn't even dig into the interview and some of the nuances there. But I want to leave you, one of the people who inspires me the most is my department chair, who did a pediatric residency in Pakistan, moved to the United Kingdom, did another pediatric residency over there, moved to the United States, did another pediatric residency before going to the NIH and doing oncology, and is now world renowned in pediatric oncology. How much do you want this? Go for it. Go for it. Go for it and don't quit. Thank you for this opportunity. Dr. Benya, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. I don't know about you all, but I was absolutely blessed by this session. You all did an amazing job. Lots of nuggets that were shared tonight. Thank you to all of those participants that joined us. Unfortunately, we broke the internet, so we couldn't get as many as we wanted. Next time, we will do this in another format so we can get as many people in as possible. But thank you, Dr. De Silva, Dr. Danso, Dr. Amponsa, Dr. Pencil. You all did an amazing job. What I am taking away from this, so what I'm going to share with my IMG mentors, the importance of being honest, having a mentor to guide you on the journey. That clinical experience, that hands-on clinical experience, extremely important. Letters of recommendations, scores, but most importantly, your story matters. Your story is what's going to set you apart and make you stand out from all the other applicants. So tell your story. This journey is not easy by yourself. So I want to encourage you, find others, find a community, find others that are on this same path with you. Join hands, link each other up, and encourage each other on this journey. It's so very important. I'm going to leave you with this quote that I love. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So please stay on this journey together. Do not try to do this by yourself. GPSF is here to help you all. Reach out to us, and we'll do everything possible to try to help you on this journey. Thank you all again, and have a great night.